But other than that, over to you, Jazz and Néka, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Fintan. Hi, everyone.
Thanks, Fintan. Hello.
Should we begin by introducing each other, Néka?
Sure. Yeah, do you want to go first?
I will introduce you first. Yeah, so we thought it would be nice to kind of introduce each other so you kind of know a little bit about both of us. And then we're going to begin by kind of having a bit of a chat in front of you all about our time on the MA Text and Performance and the things we've done since then. And then we are both going to share just a little bit of the kind of stuff that we're working on each at the moment before opening up the conversation. So I'm going to begin just by introducing Néka to everyone. So Néka is a disabled queer theatre maker, collaborator and academic at the Theatre and Performance Department at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. She has an MA in Text and Performance from Birkbeck and RADA, of course, during which she honed both her creative practice as a director, theatre maker, and her research trajectory in the field of performance studies in the Global South. Néka is currently studying towards a PhD at the Wit School of Arts, in which she intends to design and mobilise a radical pedagogy in theatre and performance, which prioritises disabled students and centralises difference to create inclusive access in the university space. As a creative researcher, Néka is interested in the dynamics of theatre and access in all its permutations, economic access, physical access, linguistic access, and access in terms of intersectional representation, politics, and power dynamics. She's also currently part of the core conference committee for Performance Studies International Conference, which will be hosted at the Wit School of Art in 2023. As a professional theatre director, her recent creative work centres around staging original South African narratives for children, such as Tiny the Tokoloshi and other African tales. I'm sorry, I probably butchered that. Which won the Naledi Theatre Award for Best Production for Young Audiences in 2019. And she is currently working on a South African adaptation of Alice in Wonderland, which will be staged in February next year. So that's all the wonderful stuff that Néka has been doing.
Thanks, Jazz. You are equally wonderful. Jazz is a lecturer at the Theatre and Performance Studies at Queen Mary, University of London. She completed the MA Text and Performance in 2015 and has a BA from Goldsmiths, University of London. Her research focuses on performance and work, with a particular interest in questions of emotional labour, theatrical production and actor training. She completed her doctorate at Birkbeck with the thesis Serving the Self, Authenticity, Performance and Emotional Labour in 2022, which used primary data gathered from British workplaces to expand and develop an understanding of the theatrical and performative influence in contemporary service and hospitality work. This research builds upon the foundational definition of emotional labour offered by sociologist Ali Hochschild by understanding it as work which requires the performance of specific traits and characteristics before an audience, usually customers. Most recently, she's published a chapter in the edited collection Feelings and Work in Modern History with Bloomsbury's History of Emotions series, which explores the application of Stanislavski and actor training within theorizations of emotional labour. As a playwright, she has worked with the Old Vic New Voices and Kali Theatre, and her work has been performed at the Old Red Lion, Brighton Fringe, RADA and Vault festivals. So yeah, I think, maybe I'll start just by asking you, Jazz, what attracted you to Birkbeck and the MA program?
Oh my gosh, it feels like so long ago. I was really glad that Fintan said which year we did the program, because I almost had forgotten if it was 2015, 16 or whatever. I think I was really interested in the particular MA that we did, which was Text and Performance, because we got to have that marriage of the kind of academic study, engaging with all these really exciting, interesting theoretical ideas and concepts in theatre and performance studies. And then we were getting to kind of put this into practice and try out all of these new ideas that we were being introduced to through theatre making. So actually, when I started the MA, I had zero intention of going into academia or doing a PhD or anything like that. I really wanted to make theatre. Specifically, I wanted to be a playwright, and I was doing some writing and did a lot of writing during the MA. So I was really attracted to the fact that the course would give me the opportunity to do more writing, do directing, and devising theatre, but also get to kind of, you know, explore all those interesting ideas in the more academic side of the course. So that was what attracted me to it. And then I think, you know, before this, we were having a little bit of chat about how that kind of worked out in practice, which was that you have this really interesting kind of contrast and like dialogue between those two strands of work that we were doing at Birkbeck and RADA at the time. And I ended up going down a slightly different path from what I imagined, in that I ended up taking the academics pathway, and now here I am. But that wasn't what initially attracted me. I guess I was interested in how I'd be able to kind of like put those ideas into practice on the stage. So what about you? I actually don't, I've never had this conversation with you, so it'd be really nice to hear your answer.
Well, I had an undergrad. Well, I have an undergrad from the same university I now teach at WITS, and the program is designed to teach you
I have gently removed Néka from the conversation.
Okay, it was Néka.
So
I
hopefully
thought it
she'll
was
come
me.
back in. She was frozen, yeah. So hopefully she'll come back in.
Okay, great. I thought I was frozen, so that clarifies things. Yeah, hopefully she's back in a second. Like, I just texted her as well, so hopefully she can get that sorted. Let me just message her. We were speaking before, and they have like power cuts at the moment. So I think she's operating on a generator because she doesn't have mains electricity at the moment. So that might be what's causing the problem. Vinton, I don't know if there's any way of seeing when she is back online.
She will just
She just said, she's just messaged me and said her internet went down and she'll be back in soon.
Jazz, while you're waiting, we can have a little conversation.
Sure.
If you want. You know, it was interesting that you highlighted there and emphasized that actually you took a slightly different path after you graduated than you thought you would. And that's always an interesting development for us too, when we have students come to us and they seem quite adamant that I'm into this, I'm going to do this and this, but actually the experience orients them in a different direction. Could you just tell us a little bit about that process for you?
Yeah, I think, that is like obviously the beauty of studying at all, and also like particularly was the kind of beauty of doing a MA that had so many pathways and so many options available to us. I guess for me, I had done an undergraduate degree in English and drama and had not enjoyed it very much. And I had kind of like fallen out of love with theatre in the process. I hadn't really, that course hadn't really like spoke to me or kind of sparked my imagination in that way. And after my undergraduate, I went and worked in a variety of jobs that had nothing to do with theatre or the arts. And my pathway back in was playwriting. So that after 4 years out of a degree, that was kind of the thing that found me kind of making my way back to theatre gradually, was through my own involvement in writing programs, in projects like Old Vic New Voices, which Old Vic was running at the time. And after doing that for a while, that kind of led me to decide to do the MA and to pursue the MA. So when I came to the MA, I'd already, like, you know, kind of had a break with theatre and theatre studies, as it were, and because my route back was very much through like practical involvement in writing programs and practical involvement in staging work, I had no expectation that I would end up wanting to do like research or wanting to take a kind of academic route through the subject again. I was really attracted to what Birkbeck had to offer in that side of things, but the main intention for me was to be kind of involved in like making plays and making work. So it is interesting and kind of amusing how these things work out. Oh, there she is, she's back. Yeah, but I think that kind of speaks to like how engaging all the teaching was as well, from you know, yourself, Seda, Louise, everybody else involved in running that program, that it really, you know, like pulled people in, even if they weren't necessarily on the MA explicitly expecting that to be their kind of main focus. The stuff that we were introduced to was really things that I think kind of inspired people to go in directions that maybe they hadn't anticipated when they had started. Hi, Néka.
Sorry, there's a giant storm
okay.
here, and it obviously had something to do with the thing. Yeah, sorry, I don't want to interrupt your flow.
No, like Finton was just asking me to say a little bit about kind of taking a route that was not expected once the MA started. Yeah. But please, like, carry on where you left off.
Thanks. I was just saying that I think my undergrad did a lot of like introductory work in multiple spaces, and I was really interested in expanding and deepening my knowledge in all of those areas, particularly in writing and directing. And I was also performing. I was an actress, you know, having entered the program and thought, oh, maybe I can keep doing this. And then I entered the program and I really suddenly went like, oh, actually, no, I much prefer the writing and directing and creative side. And I'm also, surprise, surprise, an academic. So that also kind of started to, like, you know, you kind of try and run away from the academia for a bit, and then it catches up with you. So that was also like quite a surprise for me that it became that. But I was also really attracted to the program because of two other reasons, I think. Is the one is obviously coming from the Global South, and all the things that we had been learning in the undergrad. I wanted to see how much of that applied in a contemporary kind of first world country where theatre and theatre making was centralized as part of your landscape. You have a very, you know, well-funded landscape compared to us. So I was interested to see that, and I live in a land of contradiction. So I like contradiction, and I was really interested in how the program would embrace contradiction. And it did, because obviously we were talking about, you know, the differences between the kind of conservative you know, dramatic training that Rada gave, and then the critical thinking and the breaking apart of that conservative training that Birkbeck offered. So I really liked the idea of moving with contradiction in the space and traveling to a space where I knew it was really global. And that was really interesting. That was the second factor. I thought, you know, I'm going to meet a whole bunch of people from different places who are doing this thing and are going to come from different perspectives. And I was really that is one of my biggest takeaways, is that there were so many people from so many places that we could connect with and continue to connect with and continue to learn from. So yeah, that was my reason, I guess.
Well, that's a really nice kind of segue, because I think the other thing that I wanted to ask you about, and for us both to speak to a little bit, was some of those collaborations and then future work that came out of doing the MA. So I know obviously you then went back to South Africa, and I guess it would be good to hear you say a little bit about what you kind of took from the MA and how that kind of interacted like with what you're doing now and the kind of career you've had since. But also, have you had the opportunity to kind of work further with people that you met during the course of your time at Birkbeck?
So I think we did quite a few collaborations during the MA program, which I remember was kind of extracurricular, which I loved. We, you know, we did that collaboration. I can't remember if it was it King's Cross Library. I feel like that's is that a thing?
With Camden. It was Camden.
Oh, Camden. Thank you.
And it was in Swiss Cottage Library, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. There was like There we go. So that was one of the things that that came out of the MA, and then some more, I had some more kind of workshopping. I had started to write a musical because I worked at McDonald's while I was in the MA, because I couldn't find another job, and I found it really interesting that I couldn't find another job because it said I'm a South African on my CV, and so the question was always whether English was my first language. So that the sort of musical came out of the program, and then I did some research and development sessions online around it. So those were the two things that came out. But I had to kind of go home and finish the thesis, so I never really got to realize some of those collaborations. But I know you did. I know you did some great collaboration work in and outside of the MA as well.
I was really lucky. So coming out of the MA, we had done quite a lot of collaborative creative work in and outside of like course time and teaching time, and towards the end of MA I had written a play, and I was really lucky in that immediately after the MA I got to collaborate with some of the people who were on the course with us. So Edwina, who directed that play, but also Lucinda, who was on the degree with us, she acted as a dramaturg, and Hayley also worked with us as well. So we ended up getting Arts Council funding for this production and taking it to Brighton Fringe Festival, to the Vault Festival in London, to the Old Red Lion, the Rosemary Branch Theatre, and a couple of other places. So that was a really great experience, because that took up like pretty much the entire year straight after the MA. Was working on that production and taking it to various places and all the kind of funding applications, and it was a really nice opportunity to kind of go from all the stuff we had been talking about and kind of developing on the course to then taking some work into theatre spaces and festivals and moving around, and also doing some funding applications and kind of getting involved in like the nuts and bolts of production. So that was a really great experience that I got to have. And then obviously I then ended up staying at Birkbeck and doing a PhD there and only leaving this year. So the kind of academic collaboration with people at Birkbeck carried on for much longer. So yeah, it feels like it was the birth of a lot of really great things and really great ideas. On that point, should we share some of our research that we're both working on at the moment?
Let's go for it. Do you want to go first?
Yes, I'm happy to. So Néka and I thought that a nice thing to do for the rest of the session would be for us each to just share like 10 minutes of the research that we are currently working on, and then open it up to discussions, which means that all of this is very early, like work in progress stuff. So just bear that in mind. I'm trying to just share my slides, so bear with me. Can you just let me know when those come up?
Yeah, they're on their way. I'll give you a signal. It's loading. There they are. They're there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm just going to share a little bit from a kind of new research project, which is coming off the back of my PhD. So it's a kind of like slightly different track from what I wrote about for my PhD thesis, but I'm kind of interested to share it here because it's something that I came across when I was doing the MA at Birkbeck and RADA, and that's kind of like directly inspired what I'm going to be working on and investigating in this research. So I thought I'd share a bit about that, if that's okay. Okay, so I'm starting with this poster, which you can see here. I originally saw this poster while I was on the MA outside the RADA building behind Birkbeck. This picture here is taken from another part of London, but I first came across this picture on the street, kind of walking to and from classes. And so this poster reads, "It's work, so work it," and it advertises RADA Business. And RADA Business is a division of RADA which offers performance and communication workshops to businesses, individuals, and corporate partners. So I was alerted to these workshops and the existence of this division by coming across this poster, and discovered that RADA Business kind of offer workshops that are meant to improve communication, teamwork, and leadership skills for groups and for individual participants. So the headline on their website, which actually I can bring up because I think it's on one of my next slides, reads: the confidence to thrive, the presence to persuade, the versatility to move any audience. So here, RADA Business are kind of taking what are skills and traits associated with performers and then translating them directly into a kind of workplace and business context. So this kind of training, this like drama-based training, has existed for a really long time. And these ideas around like company culture and communication skills have obviously existed in the kind of business space for a really long time as well. In Britain, there are a number of companies and consultancies who have been doing this kind of work for decades. So there's just a few examples here. A very well-known one is Actors in Industry. There's another group called Interact, and then there are smaller companies like ID Partnership, but many other groups that kind of go into workplaces or bring teams or individuals in and do these kind of drama-based communication and leadership workshops. But I'm really interested in the fact that drama schools specifically have been entering this space and entering this kind of industry specifically over the last 20 years. So the questions I'm really interested in exploring in this kind of area are what the kind of rapid expansion of this kind of drama-based training in the workplace means, why drama schools are entering this landscape, and what the kind of impact of that is. So I want to talk a little bit about the history, think about why these institutions might be keen to expand into this area, and also why businesses and workplaces are interested in using drama and theatre training as a way of skills training their workforce or their management. Okay, so RADA Business specifically was founded in 2001, and its model obviously kind of trades on the school's reputation, on its brand, on its status to bring in clients and partners, and it's really successful in doing that. So clients for RADA Business include international consultancies, fashion houses like Stella McCartney, but also diplomats, senior civil servants, and academics at various universities and in various departments. There are at least 45 tutors working, mostly in a freelance capacity at RADA Business, and they have a range of expertise in things like body and voice, etc. And RADA is not alone in doing this kind of work. So another big drama school that's entered this area is Central School of Speech and Drama. They have their own division called Central for Business, and their training courses are offered on things like storytelling, courageous conversations, and personal impact. And they've worked with organizations like Twitter, Santander, and the NHS. So returning to RADA then, some of the workshops being offered here, which are tailored to individuals, managers, leaders, as well as to teams and groups, and in the form of one-to-one coaching. There are workshops like Being the Brand, which is practical sessions that encourage employees to tell positive stories about the companies they work for. There are also workshops that run with a focus on improvisation that help teams to become more creative at work. And the website kind of explains that the RADA Business has a reputation that they've developed for their corporate work by making RADA's ideas relevant to a business context. So they say, quote, "When we talk about learning skills from actors, it's got nothing to do with being inauthentic or becoming a different person. It's about delivering your best performance and being able to do so consistently, whoever you are," end quote. So I'm really interested in drama schools doing this kind of work, because here we can see that they're kind of positioning actors as people who can enable clients to craft workplace performances and use their kind of sense of inner authentic material to help them perform better at work. So they're not using actors to create a sense of artifice or to generate a role or a character that's predetermined. There's a real emphasis instead on kind of being your best self and being able to perform your best self at work. So any reference to the kind of theatricality of what actors do is absent here, and there's a focus instead on unleashing authenticity via the use of dramatic techniques, which can help people to unlock their own performances. And in conversations I've started to have with practitioners who are doing this kind of work at RADA and in other institutions, this is an emphasis they really like to add. So they often say things like, it's not about acting, but we do all have the same instrument as the actor, or it's about broadening our personal repertoire of authenticity. So this is a kind of framework that's being offered here. And I think that this expansion of drama schools into kind of corporate training is a really interesting example, illustration, but also outcome of changes that have been happening in the workplace since the 1970s onwards, specifically in the West, and specifically in kind of Britain and America, where we've seen service economies boom as manufacturing has kind of disappeared. So we've seen that the skills associated with professional actors have entered broader consciousness as a set of skills which are useful and valuable to businesses in other sectors, other industries, and other areas of the economy outside of theatre and the creative sectors. So RADA Business caters to executives, to management teams, and to larger businesses. And they, you know, these workshops are quite expensive as well. But we can see that there are other, you know, areas, other businesses, other sectors that are also kind of relying on these kind of ideas and skills, even if they're not paying for such training. So the kind of more recent emphasis on soft skills and communication skills at work has allowed drama schools and other providers to capitalize by offering these short courses that kind of repackage elements of actor training and now make them directly applicable to other workplaces and other businesses. And this kind of change has been articulated in the work of business and management scholars for quite a while as well. So a scholar, Joseph Badaracco, has emphasized the importance of character and leadership. Robert Seed has used data from US companies to argue that drama is really useful in terms of corporate leadership training. And Pine and Gilmore in the Harvard Business Review in 2005 famously said that work is theater now and every business is a stage. So while drama-based training in work has a long history, we can see that the market for these courses has really grown significantly over the last 20 to 30 years. And this is also marked by the expansion of drama schools and now theatres into the field directly, rather than just these kind of private drama providers that we had before. And I think that's interesting because previously, companies that would offer communications workshops and these kind of skills training, they might employ actors to deliver that training, but they weren't framing their offering in this kind of explicit reliance on the actor's craft or the theatrical tradition. When RADA or Central are offering this, they're really banking on their reputation for theatrical excellence, for training the best actors in the world. And so they're kind of offering a similar training, but it's far more explicitly now predicated on like the actor's own skill and craft and tradition, which I think is really interesting. And so this kind of like theatre-based corporate training has been called corporate theatre by the theatre scholar Sarah Sadler, who's written really interesting work about this kind of skills training happening in the Indian context. So she calls it corporate theatre, and I find that a really useful term to use. And so I think that this kind of expansion of business training through the drama school is a result of a convergence of a number of factors. So the main one being that drama schools in Britain in the later half of the 20th century severed most of their formal ties to the theatre industry. So they used to be kind of independent institutions that had quite close ties to the theatre industry. But now most of these conservatoires and drama schools have been incorporated into higher education. So most of them now sit within the university structure. They've kind of been taken over by a bigger university and they're a kind of branch of that. And so now they take accreditation and funding from the kind of higher education system in Britain. And that's a really significant development because it kind of changes the nature of what they can do, but it also has put different kind of financial pressures on these drama schools. Obviously, changes to higher education over the last 20 years particularly have meant kind of marketization of higher education coming in. Unfortunately, Birkbeck is a horrible example of that right now because there's really awful restructuring and job cuts being proposed at Birkbeck itself. But we can kind of see that this is also has an effect on drama schools that are now working under the kind of university system. And as a result, there's a kind of market in offering short courses because they're quite lucrative and they can help keep these institutions financially going. So Frank Camilleri, who writes about drama schools, has argued that in the context of performer training, marketization means that we have this previously holistic residential tradition of training now converted into a system where you can kind of break down actor training into smaller chunks and then sell it to people in kind of smaller bite-sized pieces rather than as this kind of wholly integrated program of study. So it's interesting to me that what drama schools do in terms of training actors, in terms of these communication capacities and this sense of like authentic performance has become really culturally valuable for people because there's a demand for this kind of thing in other sectors of the economy and other businesses, at the same time that their whole model of training for actors has become really like financially precarious and really financially difficult situation for them. And so we've seen quite a lot of drama schools start to close. So Drama Centre is a famous one, a very important drama centre which is closed, but also Alva recently, which is another drama school in London, also recently announced their closure. And so I get the sense that there's a kind of bigger transformation going on in actor training, and that drama schools as a whole are kind of going through a period of, for some of them crisis, but for some of them kind of renewal and change. And that this expansion into the kind of corporate world and into the business world might play a part in their future and might play a part in like how they carve out a future for themselves as institutions who are under quite a lot of pressure. So that's kind of what I'm working on at the moment in very early stages. So obviously this kind of came about because the MA that we did was at Birkbeck and RADA. I know it's now with Camden People's Theatre, but being there and getting to experience like a taste of the kind of drama school institution, and then being at Birkbeck and getting to think through all these like really interesting critical frameworks and ideas about what's kind of happening between the arts industries and its kind of intersection with work more generally, kind of led to this research idea. So I'm going to stop now and pass over to Néka.
Thanks, Jazz. Super fascinating. I'm sure we'll come back to it at the end. I'm gonna take a slightly different route with this. I just wanted to share like a little bit about what I've been doing since the MA, which will also include some of the research that I'm doing. I just want to share my screen. Hopefully it will be the right one. Can you just shout and tell me if it's there?
It's there, we can see it.
Awesome. Okay, so I left Birkbeck 2015 and kind of dived straight into trying to find some work as a performer, director, writer back at home. And the first thing that I did was perform in a version of the Caucasian Chalk Circle in the Johannesburg Theatre, which is one of our government-funded theatres. But that was pretty much the first and only professional acting work that I did when I left. The rest was mostly around directing and theatre making. So I directed 2 shows at a arts festival called Red Fest. There's a Zulu on My Stupid Heart and Susical Jr., which was the start of my kind of interest and springboard into theatre for young audiences. This is something that I had done, I had performed in a little bit before I did the MA, and then came back and found that people were kind of going, oh, we need to expand the offering that we have in general in Johannesburg for our youth. So I started kind of diving more and more into that. And one of the biggest things that I directed was in 2018 for the National Children's Theatre, which was a production of Antony and Cleopatra. And this is interesting because it was a set work for our school leaving, kind of private school leaving students. I don't know if it's GCSEs or something like that. That's the equivalent in the UK. But we were finding that because Shakespeare is so far from Africa, so far from our center of knowledge, that we are questioning its relevance in the curriculum and have been for some time. Nevertheless, it remains one of the stalwart kind of pillars of an English curriculum. So what we were trying to do was make an accessible version of Antony and Cleopatra for students to kind of go, oh, this is what it is, to use people that they can recognize themselves in, to make it culturally relevant and to kind of take it back to where it belongs, which is kind of Egypt and Africa. So it was a young cast of nine performers, professional performers, and some very low budget sets that traveled around the country and did a national tour. So that was lots of fun. And out of that came quite a bit of research, which I'll talk about a little bit later. I then directed a production of Peter Sannatrieb's Hunter-Gatherers at the Market Theatre in 2019. This was an incredible opportunity for me because the Market Theatre is one of South Africa's most well-known theatres for its for the role that it played as an anti-racist space during apartheid, and continues to kind of hold that history and move forward with that history. So being able to direct a work there was really exciting. And it was also with a young cast of professionals who we kind of staged it as an immersive theatre piece, making the whole theatre space a living room, essentially. And it's a little bit of a surreal play. So we added, and it kind of sparked more of my research into sensory theatre and immersive theatre, because we added things like smells, tastes, and a lot of tactile experiential moments for the audience. So that started me thinking along the lines of my PhD research, which is around theatre and access, and how best to use theatre strategies to make theatre more accessible for audiences with different needs. So that was kind of like the spark. And then Jazz mentioned this in my introduction, I was approached by a theatre company who works mostly in musical theatre, actually, and the kind of equivalent of commercial musical theatre that you would have on the West End. But they're one of their smaller productions that they wanted, one of their smaller theatres that they have wanted to start making children's theatre or theatre for young audiences. And so they commissioned me to devise a production for young audiences that was specifically South African. And we don't get a lot of that. If you kind of come here to direct a piece of children's theatre, you're going to fall back on your, Disney's and whatever else you can find that's here. So one of the biggest things we don't have is kind of original South African stories. So I collaborated with this cast of 4 young people, or younger performers, and we made this story called Tiny the Tokolosh, which kind of like brought together a couple of myths and legends, South African myths and legends and African myths and legends, into this one story. The Tokolosh is a mythical creature that's supposed to take you away in your sleep, and he's got a really bad rep. So what we wanted to do was change it around and make him a dream, kind of a sandman, a dream maker, who one day he was seen by a child, and then the child got scared of him, and then he kind of like revealed the community of Tokoloshes, and this story was about bringing back his good reputation. So I'm gonna play a short promo video just so you get a sense of it, but you don't need to hear the sound, just in case you're wondering. So that was one of my most exciting collaborations, because it got to really bring in all of the skills that I had been honing in the MA, in the sense that I devised, scripted, directed, designed, sort of did everything possible in the theatre making process, and it won an award at at our National Theatre Awards called the Naledi's. So I was really excited about that one. And then Alice in Wonderland was a South African adaptation, which we did just before COVID. In fact, it was running, and then the country went into national lockdown. So unfortunately, it didn't see a full run, but we're doing it again in February. Again, filling a kind of a gap for children's theatre in a particular space in Johannesburg, but obviously this one is a little bit more well known. So we tried to localize it a little bit to make it more relevant. And then I also, so that kind of stuff that I did and continue to do professionally, I consider a huge part of a result of the MA that I did at Birkbeck. But the other huge part that I also didn't expect to fall into was academia and teaching. So I now work as a full-time lecturer in the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, and I've been there for 5 years, and I've taught on many of the undergraduate programs. I teach performance, I teach directing, and I teach on the academic major. So I also teach critical thinking and writing and things like that in terms of how to marry practice with theory. And I think that's been a huge part of my trajectory and my interest. And these are some of the students that I work with. And one of the projects that I do, one of the research projects that I've done for the last 3 years is an honors research project called Theatre and Access. And so my interest in theatre and access stems, of course, from my context, in the sense that, especially in the pandemic, it comes to light even more that theatre in general is not supported by anyone in South Africa, government, corporates, general public. You know, it's quite a precarious career to find yourself in, and it's an art form that constantly needs to justify itself and its existence, and it fights a lot for funding. And if you consider the humanities as the kind of on the bottom rung of the university space, then the arts and theatre are at the bottom rung of that. And so it's really interesting, and I think it's feeding off what Jazz is saying around this idea that Wits has just had its 100th birthday this year, and we as the theatre and performance department were asked to do a whole lot of stuff. We were asked to perform, we were asked to be at parades, we were asked to pull things out of the air to make everything look beautiful, and there was this sense of like, oh, we'll give you some money for that so that we can make Wits look beautiful, but we won't actually fund any of your programs and we won't prioritize you. And you know, so we also facing some of those interesting contradictions. And so my interest came in when I was going, well, what does theatre and access mean? What does access to theatre mean? And I mean it in terms of, you know, most combinations. So I've worked with students who are interested in theatre and access in terms of the economy, in terms of students actually knowing what theatre is at school level and then being able to go into it in a tertiary space, in terms of theatre and representation. So representation for queer bodies, representation for intersectional bodies, Black bodies, people of color. So theatre in terms of that, theatre and access in terms of disability, and disabled audience members and disabled actors and what that means, and linguistic access. We have a lot of questions around the prevalence of English and using English because everybody understands it, but we in fact have 11 official languages in South Africa. So there are some really interesting questions that come up around theatre and access, and the research project that I've been running kind of informs my PhD work as well. So I've also had a couple of, I've presented in a couple of conferences, both here in South Africa, but also globally. And I have 2 publications at the moment. One in a Routledge collection called Western Theatre in Global Contexts, which was me writing about the Antony and Cleopatra experience, and whether or not Shakespeare can be truly decolonized. Which also points out my own positionality as a white woman directing Antony and Cleopatra in South Africa, and how that is possibly precarious in terms of the aim of decolonizing, and whether in fact Shakespeare should be part of the curriculum at all. And then so that was in Western, that was actually the one in South Africa, Shakespeare in South Africa Journal. So that's the one article. The other one in the Routledge book is a paper that I co-wrote with a colleague of mine, which was also talking about Antony and Cleopatra, but it was talking about it in terms of a slightly different angle. So those are the two publications that I have at the moment. And I know that Jazz mentioned this, but I'm really excited about this year. So the PSI conference, Performance Studies International Conference, we won the bid to host it in Johannesburg. It will be the first time it's hosted in Africa, and so you're all invited to submit abstracts for it. The deadline is the 16th of December. If you'd like to, let me know in the chat and I'll send you details. But the theme of the conference is something that's really interesting. It's a Zulu phrase that means the journey is self-controlling. So it's all about journeying, moving, migration, and embodied knowledges, and recentering performance studies as a form of embodied knowledge, both in practice and in theory or in research. So that's something really exciting that's happening that I'm a part of. And then some of the research and the articles that I'm writing at the moment have to do with coming back to myself as a disabled person and a disabled artist, and really thinking through what that means in terms of my practice and my pedagogy. So I'm currently studying towards a PhD that integrates pedagogy, performance, and disability, those three pillars. I want to design a performance studies curriculum and execute a performance studies curriculum for disabled students, in order to centralize a marginalized community, but also to prove that if you are able to design a pedagogy for disabled students, it is likely to be more universally accessible for everybody else, because of the kinds of things you have to consider when you prioritize disabled students. And so I have been doing variations of what I think the PhD will end up being in various forms, as you can see some of the practical work on the screen, but also some of the abstracts and the written work that I've done around reclaiming myself through autoethnographic research, and then designing a pedagogy of difference for disabled students. And then my most recent one is around care and collaboration and humanizing pedagogies in teaching performance arts theory, because we find that there's quite a gap between practice and theory with our students. So yeah, that's me. Sorry, it's like a bit of a big survey, but there you go. I think it just points to, for me, like when I was putting this together, I was going, okay, so these are the various things that the MA really offered me, and I'm so happy to continue to find intersections with what Birkbeck offered.
That was great. Thank you so much, Néka.
Well, thank you,
both
Jazz.
so much. It was an incredible overview of all you've been up to. It was amazing to see how your work just has gone in such varied directions, straddling practice, academia, dealing with a lot of social and political issues, access issues, issues around labor, economy. Really, really fascinating to hear about that. I could have a conversation with both of you that could go on for a long time, but there are technically only 7 minutes left. So we might use this opportunity to hear from the people who are in attendance. If anybody would like to say anything or make a comment in the chat, please do so now. But if you want to speak, just raise your hand and we'd love to hear from you. Maybe some of your old classmates would like to join in. It'd be nice to hear from them. If I know anything about how these things go, your classmates are probably listening here thinking, oh, I really want to get back into such and such a thing.
Right.
So we've Eve.
Hi, yeah, I've got a question for you, Jazz. Thank you to both of you. It's really nice to see you again and to hear all the interesting things you're both doing, first of all. Jazz, I wondered how it had been for you interacting with both RADA and Birkbeck over this time, and if you feel your relationship has changed with both institutions, and what you hope that relationship will be like going forward.
That's a really interesting question, because I think since MA, I haven't really interacted with RADA, because I've been based at Birkbeck for like 5 years doing a PhD, and this research into drama schools wasn't really part of that. I mean, I think I wrote maybe like 500 or like 1,000 words on this as part of my PhD, but it was kind of like looking at a different area. And now I'm like coming back to it. And now I'm like, oh, I need to go back to RADA and have started talking to people who are working in that institution. So kind of like returning there, which is interesting because going back to it in like a really different capacity from the relationship that we had when we were MA students. And of course, RADA is also not part of the MA anymore. So it's a really different relationship. I guess I go back to RADA now, or like look at this topic or look at that institution now much more from the lens of somebody who now teaches drama students and is now which I obviously had no experience of when I myself was a drama student there, and now like 5 or 6 or 7 years later, having taught at Birkbeck but also now teaching at Queen Mary, I kind of look at it more as an educational institution and think much more about the kind of frameworks that they're using to work with students. And it's really interesting like hearing Néka's research, because I think it really speaks to a lot of the things that drama schools in Britain, and I presume internationally, are having to grapple with right now in terms of calls for like decolonizing the curriculum, for diversifying their curriculum, but also for thinking of questions of inclusion and access. Like these are all really live issues that institutions like RADA and Central are trying to find ways of navigating as well. So I guess I'm looking at it kind of from that more kind of outside perspective, but through what they're doing in terms of education, which to me like really speaks to some of the things that Néka was talking about as well. I hope that kind of answers your question, Eve.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Thank you, Eve. You want to just select one of the questions maybe there from the chat, Jazz and Néka yourselves. There's a few there. We won't get to them all.
Okay, yeah, so there's advice, and then there's what Vika's asking me, did you come up against any issues from students or people you collaborated with in essay when directing works like Antony Dichotomy? Yeah, I think I will perpetually live in a space where my positionality is problematic, which is great. So there was a lot of questioning around whether my perspective as a white female director was valid in terms of directing Antony and Cleopatra, and whether Antony and Cleopatra had a place at all. So there was a lot of that, and the students as well who watched it were very vocal about like, we don't understand this, we don't get it, we don't want it, why do we have to care? And so it was really interesting to come up with reasons. And I think one of the biggest things that I was able to come up with is that decolonization is about feeling like the Eurocentric and the American and the Western perspective is questionable and can be owned by anyone. And so we can take ownership of Antony and Cleopatra in the same way as I suppose we were colonized. So yeah, lots of complications and nice things coming up there.
Eli's question about whether the degree has helped us in areas and skills outside of theatre. I don't know if you have anything to say to that, Néka. I mean, obviously, like I've gone into academia, so it's really helped me. Because I wouldn't be here if I hadn't done the MA. So in terms of like my research and my teaching skills, that's definitely like where it all started for me.
I think for me, it's what it did was it really opened me up to multiple spaces beyond theatre. So being able to bring in, other fields of thinking and practice, like philosophy and sociology and politics and all of those things, was, made me realize that I need to open myself up a lot more. And I'm able to take some of the skills that I learned both with RADA and with Birkbeck and place them in different contexts, which makes me feel a bit more like a chameleon, which is lovely. And then just quickly, the advice. I think for me, I don't know where people come from, but I think as somebody who is not English and from the UK, I suppose, my biggest piece of advice would just be to remember who you are in the space, to bring what you have to the space. And I mean, Jazz and I were talking about this. We all always feel like imposters. And I don't think that feeling ever goes away. So just find confidence in what you want to do and say within the MA, and allow other people to really challenge that and open you up to more things.
Yeah, I would just say, which kind of speaks to Eli's question and Seda's, that probably one of the best things you'll get out of the experience, regardless of which degree or which kind of stage that you're at, is the other people that you're going to meet on that course. And that will be one of the most like kind of lasting things that you take away, is those connections and relationships that you'll have the opportunity to build with people that can lead to such amazing collaborations later down the line. So my advice would be, make the most of that and really take opportunities to work together and to like collaborate, and to build those kind of connections and see where they might lead to in the future. And I also think being on a degree which requires you to make creative collaborative work is a really valuable skill in any area of life, because it teaches you a lot about how you collaborate in whatever form that might lead to.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and it's also something which, of course, you have to do yourself. It takes work to stay in touch with people, and it takes a certain kind of courage and a certain kind of sense of time. When is the right time to do it? When is the wrong time? And often when people leave, they need a little bit of time to kind of decompress and then find a way to recalibrate and reconnect. So these things don't happen for you. You have to kind of, work hard to make them happen. And I think, what you've just described really emphasizes that. I was really taken to what you said too, Néka, about, trying to figure out what it is you want to say in the MA. Because of course, so much of teaching and, master's education, I mean, this is sort of open, this is true of all experiences at BA, MA level. You spend, quite a bit of time figuring out what other people are saying and trying to understand what you think about that. But you're studying for the MA because you have a hunch, at least, that there is something that you want to say or something that you want to make. And often we find that kind of opens up closer, perhaps towards the end of the experience. And what's been so lovely to discover from meeting you again this evening is that you have been, saying and making a lot, and you're really advanced in that stage, and such a wonderful illustration of what education can, and training can open up for people.
Thank you. What's really nice is it's all morphing and it all continues. And it's really nice to come back and forth. And just to say that, like, it feels really insular when you're in the MAs because you've got particular things that you need to achieve. And it can feel lonely because you grapple with so much, but lean on each other. It's really important to do that, no matter what you do. Like, lean on each other, even if it's just phone and cry and then we're done and can carry on. That's really important, and I think that would set you up for whatever you're going to do afterwards, I think. Agreed. Has Eve got another hand up, or is that an old hand?
I think it's a legacy hand.
Legacy hand, yeah.
Old hand.
Okay, cool.
This feels like a very natural end point for a conversation, even though I know that people would have a lot more to say and to talk about. But it feels like we should wrap things up here. Like I said at the beginning, I hope that just sort of seeing your faces and names might prompt you to kind of reconnect with each other, if you wish to do so. But most of all, I just want to say thank you to you all for coming, and especially thanks to Néka and Jazz for talking us through what you've been up to over the past number of years. It's been a real pleasure to learn about your work and your experiences and to have a sense of your future trajectories. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. So nice to see everyone here.
Really nice.
Bye, everyone. You can turn your cameras on before you go so I can see you all one more time.
Oh. It's so nice to see everyone. Oh my goodness. I feel so far. I really feel far in moments like this. I'm like, I want to come have coffee with everyone.
Bye. Bye. Thank you for coming.
Awesome.
Thank you, Vinton.
Thank you.
Thank you, Néka.
Thank you. Thank you. It was really fun. Oh. Are you there, Vinton?
Thank you. Yes, I'm just trying to.
Oh, cool.
I turn it off. Sorry. Yes. There we are. Yeah.